Hi. Hey, thanks so much for checking in with this edition of the LongHaulPartner.com video blog series. Glad to have you aboard. This edition questions the relationship between shipping contracts, driver turnover, and carrier profit. It's entitled Shipping Contracts, Driver Turnover, Carrier Profit. Are they related? Are exclusive shipping contracts squeezing our carriers? Nothing is ever perfect in an imperfect world, but since most of us receive a salary for doing something, we can always rise to the challenge of making things better or worse. Since reality isn't optional, since most of us don't have functional crystal balls, we learn to live with such common sense adages like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Conversely, if it ain't broke, keep fixing it till it is. This is life on Earth generally, and it's certainly demonstrated in the trucking industry, isn't it? Most large carriers in the freight industry today have pretty much founded their business and reputation by entering into and maintaining more or less exclusive shipping contracts in various market segments. A great idea, and if my name was Jerry Moyes or Kevin Knight, and I was running Swift, Knight, Schneider, Werner, or any one of a dozens more, I assure you I'd have probably done the same exact thing. Contracts have made the investment in trucks and drivers safer, more risk-free by basically guaranteeing the carrier a base minimum level of freight business throughout the year. It's just simply safer to invest in new trucks and drivers. This system has worked in that companies like Knight and others have grown to immense size and are essentially debt-free. This is no mean feat, and it doesn't happen by accident. It happens through the hard work and dedication of hundreds and thousands of hard-working people committed to excellence. I applaud all these companies and I envy their success. That said, things are less than perfect. Driver compensation and turnover are broken. They need to be fixed if carriers are to maintain current profit levels or become even more profitable. Excuse me. I'm 62 years young. Over the past couple of years, I've met folks at the Phoenix terminals, Werner, May, Knight, and Swift, along with a couple of smaller dogs. And in every case, the people that I met were serious, stand-up professionals, knowledgeable about what they were doing, helpful, and they were inclined to treat me fairly and much better than I expected, and in some cases deserved. I'd been a driver back in '75 and '76 as a means of saving money to go to engineering school in Madison, Wisconsin. Fast forward to 2009 and my civil engineering consulting business died stone cold dead with the Arizona construction economy. So I brilliantly decided to become an owner-operator. How dumb was that? Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find a viable financial path with the various training companies. That's what I call companies like Swift, Knight, Werner. They're willing to take on new drivers out of CDL school and train them. Anyway, I couldn't find a training company where I could determine a path financially to becoming an owner-operator. There was no way. Now, admittedly, the problem was, and still is, my own greed. Not the companies themselves. I'm willing to pay my dues, be a company driver for a couple of years, relearn the business, etc. But I also expect to be adequately compensated along the way. And this can't happen when you're running 1,800 miles a week for 34, 36, 38 cents a mile. The primary driver question quickly becomes, why am I sitting around waiting for loads all the time? I can have a car or a house when I'm home, but I can barely afford both. What's going on? I'm living in a truck. And in turn, the truck I'm living in is living in parking lots around the country, not on the road. Why? Why is that? If this situation can't be good for me as a driver, how can it be good for the carrier that I'm trying to work for? I suspect the answer brings us back to the if it ain't broke, don't fix it adage, and that is exclusive freight contracts. The same contracts that minimize carrier risk are also the same contracts that cap potential profit. These contracts are similar to a bull market spread in commodity trading. The spread play reduces your potential downside risk, but it also limits your potential gain to the difference between the high and low prices on the spread. You can't make more money than this spread on the trade regardless of how the market moves, up or down. The exclusive freight contracts have a similar profit restriction, at least in my opinion. The carrier has to maintain a baseline minimum number of tractors, trailers, drop yards, and drivers to service these exclusive contracts. When Lowe's or Home Depot or Target or Walmart or whoever calls, you better have a truck and a driver to service that call, or you're going to lose that contract, aren't you? Yet, these contracts are not sufficient to keep the required number of drivers busy. Instead of drivers routinely running, say, 2,500, 2,700 miles a week, they're lucky to hit 2,000 miles. As an example, the national fleet average for Swift transportation, I was told in my 2012 orientation at Swift, is 35 driving hours per week per driver. I double-checked with Swift to see if that was correct. Well, it was. I thanked the Swift folks, who I frankly enjoyed meeting, and I left their orientation without even signing on or driving. I can't make those numbers work and save operating capital for my new owner-operator business plan. There's no way. Another thing I learned at Swift and Knight and these other trainer companies, Werner, is the topic of the hour at all large carriers that I personally visit. Now granted, that's only a handful. But those that I've visited with over the past couple of years are all the same. The topic of the hour is resource allocation and underusage of resources. You hear it all the time. It's like a mantra. Now, in my humble opinion, as a wannabe newbie driver, which, by the way, is in the past context of being an engineer trained to find solutions to problems, the obvious problem here is the nature of the freight contracts themselves. The same contracts that reduce carrier risk simultaneously saddle the carrier with more equipment and drivers than can be kept rolling. This exorbitant expense acts like a constant brake on profitability. The market won't tolerate higher rates to compensate carriers for this expense, and carriers can't service their contracts without it. A very serious catch-22 conundrum. So, what's the fix? Short answer? I don't know. I'm not that smart, given the fact that at this point, shippers and receivers, as well as the freight haulers, are all pretty much trained and are dependent on this exclusive contract system, which it turns out is both a help and a hindrance. But I do have an idea. For the sake of being facetious, which I frequently am, let's call the new system, which is really just an old, discarded idea, the better way. You may recall that free markets are the most automatic, most autonomously operating things in the world. They work. They're like magic, and when they're allowed to work, actually level the playing field for everybody. Automatically, millions of goods and services are produced, shipped, priced, purchased, and used wherever they are needed most, all automatically adjusted and coordinated by simple supply and demand. Central planning has never been able to duplicate this incredible feat. It may be beneficial for carrier management and shippers to recall this historic fact, because it turns out that exclusive freight contracts are actually a form of monopoly that restricts supply and demand, thereby bottlenecking business rather than bolstering it like it's supposed to. Monopoly can be a two-edged sword. Now, this is the end of part 1. Please stay tuned for part 2, and we'll talk a little more in depth about the Better Way solution. Thank you so much for checking in.